His Excellency, the Ambassador of Palestine, Ambassador Al-Dijan, Professor Farid Isaac, Reverend Edwin Harrison, Ruben Pasha of the Constitution Hill, Sean Bolton of the Ahmad Kathrada Foundation, the national convener and national spokesperson of IAW, Nabila. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, thank you for inviting me to address you today. It is an honor that I do not take lightly, given the importance and extremely sensitive nature of its subject matter. I hope with this address to offer personal and political reflections on Israeli and Palestinian relations that are buoyed by a desire for human rights, humanity, and equality to be placed at the center of our engagements with the realities of an enduring struggle over land, identity, belonging, and personhood. In order to avoid the sort of flippancy that personal reminiscence can easily fall into, despite the gravity of such matters, I will frame my thoughts through the writings of those who have studied this question intimately and therefore more thoroughly. The opening lines of a book edited by Aslam Farouk Ali begin with two quotations that get to the heart of what has become known as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The first, by Theodor Herzl, reads, and I quote, "The Jews who wish for a state will have it. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil and die peacefully in our own homes. The world will be freed by our liberty, enriched by our wealth, magnified by greatness. And whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare will react powerfully and beneficially for the good of humanity," close quote. The second that follows it states, and I quote, "I look forward to the day when Israel can say to me and millions of other Palestinians, here is your family's house by the sea. Here are the lemon trees, the olive grove your father tended. Come and be whole again. Then we can speak of a future together," close quote. These are the words of Musa Abu Mazouk. These statements and the history of conflicts that exists in the gaps between them and the people they are attached to give rise to the competing realities that set the conditions for today's gathering. We are here because what happens outside of our borders matters, and because the people who it happens to matter. Across the world, democracies claim of having the sole mandate on the principles of freedom, justice, and equality are being tested. It has become increasingly evident that democratic states are capable of the very actions they claim to contest and the kinds of fascism their central texts abhor. As such, we are cautioned to understand that democracy is not a destination, but a process, and is never guaranteed simply by its arrival or utterances. We are required to hold it to account and continually ask questions of its ongoing sides of conflict, civil war, poverty, and human rights violations. These questions are ostensibly designed to reach workable solutions that will improve the lives of many who live under deplorable conditions. They become, however, difficult to place into perspective when they have been subject to consistent repetition. As such, secularity can cause stasis or, at worst, fatalistic discourses to dominate. What can we do can swiftly be reformulated into there is nothing that we can do. This is where we currently find ourselves as we consider the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli crisis. I speak to you today energized by a deep belief in the power of democracy and a desire for human rights to triumph over all adversity. How then do we achieve ways of living together, particularly when separateness has for so long dictated the very character of who we are, marking the territory that we live in, as well as our interactions, realities, and our bodies? Farouk Ali conceives of this difference as forming social imaginaries that impact the way we view the world, and argues that to understand the differences within this conflict requires us to understand the different paradigms, prisms, and biases of Israelis and Palestinians as divergent social imaginaries. He argues, most importantly, the social imaginary is that common understanding that makes possible common practices and a widely shared sense of legitimacy. The collision of self-determination, struggles, minority rights, religious affiliations, fear, violence, nationalist struggles, ideology, international interference, regional conflict, human rights, occupation, and other factors have calcified into the present condition. We must not forget that this is an internationalized and interstate conflict which has taken on regional and other dimensions. My visit to Palestine in 2006 convinced me of the necessity of recognizing the fundamental principles of democracy in the region, which include the rights of each group to exist and enjoy sovereignty, and the recognition of the present and historical realities that see oppression, dispossession, and different laws for different people living in the same area. Having lived under such conditions, I know its effects all too well and how they solidify into institutions, laws, mentalities, and the character of states. Program Director, the post-1948 developments in the region have seen, among other shifts, the erection of new settlements that have changed the physical reality of the areas of Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. When one apprehends the changes to the map of the area from the Jewish settlements of 1914 to Palestine and the Transjordan under the British Mandate in 1923, Jewish land ownership in 1947, the UN Partition Plan of 1947, and the Israeli borders and armistice lines of 1949, what becomes increasingly clear is the huge and continuing shifts in land and territory ownership, which I would humbly submit render the two-state solution in its current iteration unworkable. The West Bank and Gaza are the homes of many of the refugees who fled in the wake of the 1947 conflict. The latter, in particular, is hugely dense. It's a hugely dense area that now takes the form of a blockaded enclave. Its economic possibilities are few. It is reliant on foreign aid, suffocated by fuel shortages and a lack of electricity and a reliable long-term water supply. There is no local, regional, or global plan for fixing these pressing issues. This is a deplorable fact. Consequently, We are required by our collective humanity to think in global and connective terms. In doing this, we should note that, firstly, the events that take place across the world affect us all in distinct ways and to varying degrees. And secondly, in humanistic terms, we should care about what happens to fellow human beings, no matter how disconnected we are by time, geography, identity, history, or circumstance. This energizes my search for a solution to the Israel-Palestinian crisis, particularly in light of the insufficiency of the popular option. The two-state solution saw its genesis in the idea that two states for two peoples could be realized. It has constituted the most favored and popular approach of the past decades and has been the foundation for diplomatic relations and international interventions of multiple actors. While it ostensibly appears the most favorable option given the desire for a Jewish homeland and an independent Palestine that stand distinct from each other and enjoy mutual independence, it has increasingly seen failure in practice, given the complex realities set out above. As such, it remains largely conceptual in character. Additionally, the questions that had been raised by the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947 remain unresolved in the present day and by the plan. This solution has, as a result, failed to bear fruit and bring an end to the violence and tension that has morphed into the status quo in the territory. What we should seek, therefore, is not mere management to the current situation, but its active resolution and transformation. The need for alternatives is clear, given present disenchantment with the solution that has been proposed for decades with little notable achievement in the last 20 years. While it still enjoys a measure of support, there remains no consensus on how to realize its dual nation aims, while settlements continue to expand, changes occur in demography, politics, and geography, and politicians continue to ebb and flow in their endorsement of such a plan, and the realities of the conflict are made commonplace. Looking to foreign relations, the United States of America, the biggest diplomatic actor in the region, is now doubling back on their support for a plan they were instrumental in proposing. Former Secretary of State John Kerry warned in his final address last year that the two-state solution was in danger of collapsing. The Oslo Accords were meant to institute a 5-year process towards realizing two nations. These accords were signed over 2 decades ago. Consequently, some are beginning to question whether the two-state solution is a feasible option, given the perceived lack of alternatives. Ladies and gentlemen, the factors affecting the disenchantment with and stagnancy of the two-state solution include: 1, the ceaseless growth of settlements in Palestinian territory, particularly the West Bank, and calls for part of its territory to be annexed. 2, the rise of the religious right in Israel and extremist groups. And 3, the political and geographic divisions within Palestine. Primarily, the two-state solution has been difficult to achieve, given 4 pressing issues and differing demands. Firstly, a lack of consensus over borders, particularly given newly constructed barriers and settlements that have rendered Palestine smaller and non-contiguous. Secondly, both Israel and Palestine view Jerusalem as their separate capitals, The two-state solution calls for it to be divided. However, its eastern half has been annexed by Israel. Thirdly, there is the matter of refugees, particularly the large number of Palestinians who now live in exile and cannot return under Israel's right of return policy. Finally, there is the matter of security, which Palestinians view as an end to military occupation and Israelis see as avoiding groups like Hamas taking over the West Bank area and maintaining their military presence. These are in no way light issues, nor ones that can be easily simplified or explained. But given their salience and lack of address within the dimensions of the two-state solution's present impact, Kerry stated, and I quote, "If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace," close quote. I cannot but help concur. We have to know that we are dealing with a multifaceted Israeli and Palestinian body politic. To consider the possibilities of unity is to think of a future in which all enjoy equal rights within the boundaries of common democracy, with rights for all and the realization of difference that does not translate into distinct realities of the present. As such, I'm increasingly interested in the possibilities of a democratic one-state solution. Such a solution could perhaps take the form of a federal state in which each side enjoys a majority in its territory. I say this acknowledging the minority fears and identity concerns which persist in the present. As such, a constitution would be required to guarantee the existence of such a federation, even as demographics shift. I make this suggestion noting that support for a one-state and two-state solution have historically shifted over time, and acknowledging the recent Palestinian-Israeli pulse. A joint poll designed to assess support for a democratic one-state solution was conducted, where more than half of Israeli Arabs endorsed the idea. However, only 36% of Palestinians and 19% of Israeli Jews expressed their support. It must be noted that the poll concluded that majorities of both Israelis and Palestinians support a two-state solution, but only in theory. Their support drops off rapidly when they are asked to contemplate the details of such an agreement. Additionally, I note that to pursue such a state is to acknowledge that it will be in perpetual process like all of our democracies. Whether young or mature, it is evident that our democratic aims are being tested and challenged, and we are all trying to find a way to live together and to be truly united. The formation of a new political entity and identity within a one-state solution will no doubt be a difficult process that would require compromises on all sides, mechanisms and modes of governance and administration, legalities, a constitution, checks and balances, and guarantees and safeguards of the unified state. Those who oppose such a solution argue that it would lead to inevitable violence and civil war. We must not forget that such violence was also predicted in South Africa, but largely avoided because of sheer human will and brave leadership. An acceptance of the status quo is not the solution, even as it continues to remain the dominant mode in the present and the future on the current trajectory. In fact, due to the ongoing illegal occupation of the West Bank there is already a de facto, if unilateral, one-state solution without the democratic contours that we should collectively desire. Change is possible. We know this to be true. We also know that it is remarkably difficult, yet remain committed to its hopes and aspirations. Separation is the present reality that Israelis and Palestinians collectively contend with. It is born of history, with the contours of the present conflict having been defined by many actors through their individual and collective actions. As a result, a singular state would need to avoid the kinds of historical action that would serve to reinforce divisions whilst preserving the identity concerns of all parties that do not conflict with democratic principles. In considering such democratic tensions, it is clear that what cannot be maintained is the illegitimate rule over another people against their will. Program Director, there are, as have been repeatedly argued, striking parallels with the South African historical condition, just as there are profound differences that color our contexts. One condition cannot be entirely transposed onto another. Yet, as celebrated Palestinian intellectual Edward Said noted, and I quote, "One of these commonalities is that a large part of the population feels itself denied access to resources, rights, ownership of land, and free movement. What I learned from the case of South Africa is that the only way to deal with a complex history of antagonisms based on ethnicity is to look at it, understand it, and then move on," close quote. In this regard, I think South Africa would do well to approach the Palestine-Israel conflict with the kind of sensitivity it deserves. For one thing, as a nation, we ourselves are still undergoing a healing process, which may very well suffer setbacks because of the way we deal with external conflicts with which we identify at sectoral level as distinct communities that constitute the South African nation. Pressures of hardening times in a global environment fraught with intractable difficulties are conspiring to compound its fragile character, the fragile character of our nation. Current scenes of xenophobia on the streets of our major cities testify to this emergent reality. What this means is that emotional approaches to engaging with our external world may do much to exacerbate our own challenges in a way that threatens to unravel the nascent vision of a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and just society. As it is, the specter of xenophobia is testing our own ability to embrace our common humanity to the limits. I would therefore submit that this is all the more reason we should never fall for the all too easy allurement to transpose international conflicts to our shores, no matter how passionate we feel about them. As South Africans, we have a duty and responsibility to unite as a people so that we are better able to contribute to the building of a better and humane world. In consequence, it ill behoves us to transpose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to our country such that we do not only reopen the historical wounds of our nation, but more ominously expand the physical boundaries of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, thus ensuring its perpetuity. I'm making this point poignantly aware that both the Muslim and Jewish communities in South Africa have historically been progressive forces that have contributed to a new human consciousness, which must not be undone by reckless resort to ill-expressed international solidarity. Additionally, anti-Semitic actions couched in the language of human rights and disguised by its discourse cannot be countenanced. Such actions not only undermine the humanity of a people and entrench a painful history, but also serve to undermine our commitment to principled and moral action. It is crucial that the struggle for human rights and an end to oppression be absolutely severed from such religious intolerance and bigotry. Similarly, the Muslim community all over the world have had to endure relentless assaults on their religion, culture, identity, and personhood, disguised as enlightened moral and modern critique. Like Farouk Ali, I hope for a day when both Israelis and Palestinians are joined in a mutual rhythm and society in which differences are acknowledged, but no longer a source of oppressive divisions and distrust. This will require an acknowledgement of dispossession, violence, destruction, displacement, deprivation, and fear, among many other factors. But it will also require hope, trust, a belief in change, and a willingness to work towards its realization. This is a kind of singular state of my imagination. My version of a one-state solution is built on the idea that a federal, secular, democratic state can be created, in which all inhabitants have equal rights and ethnicity and religion are no longer dividing features of life. The late President Nelson Mandela's words neatly sum up my feelings on this issue when he states that, and I quote, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite," close quote. That should be our collective destination, and I thank you for your kind attention.